should you consider an OLED gaming laptop as your next display choice? And here we're going to talk about 5 things why I believe a OLED is far superior to any other type of display in the end of 2023. And also there's a few bonus items, 3 in particular, that I want to talk about that you need to know about OLED displays before you commit. So let's begin with number 1. So first thing about OLED displays is that this runs at a much higher resolution. You've got a Retina-like 3.2K by 2K resolution on this display versus on the right hand side here we've got a traditional full HD 1080p display. Number 2, the refresh rate. On the OLED we've got 120 Hz refresh rate finally. If you know anything about the OLED laptops from past years, we were stuck at 60 Hz. It's finally nice to see that we have not only high res OLED panels but also high refresh rate OLED panels, which make the gaming experience a blast. Number 3, combined with those refresh rates, what you need also is a very high response or very low response time so that the picture is pushed to the image and to the display much quicker than it is on its counterpart. And the faster that image is pushed, the less lag you perceive and you feel more connected to the game. And on the OLED, we've got 0.2 milliseconds, one of the big claim to fames of OLED displays, particularly for gaming and high refresh rate and fast gaming. On the traditional IPS panel, we're sitting somewhere around 7 milliseconds in terms of response time. Not all that bad. You may feel a little bit of lag, but for most people, it's not going to be an issue. You cannot notice it unless you're very, very highly sensitive or you have actual professional tools for calibration and measurement. So it is something to consider, however. Number 4. In addition to all of those factors, we're now getting OLED displays which are finally brighter. The OLED gaming displays of prior years were stuck at 300, 350, perhaps 400 nits and claiming to be HDR capable displays. Now, while it's easy to get that HDR certification from VESA standards by forking over a few dollars, you will not get an actual HDR experience. To really experience HDR, and I can say this from having tested a mini LED display recently on the Legion 9i, this HDR capable OLED display on the ProArt StudioBook, as well as having upgraded my desktop monitor to a mini LED 1000 nits Samsung Odyssey G8 4K 240Hz monitor. So that said, it's going to make a huge difference having those brighter displays. And finally, we have the OLED here that's not only 3.2K by 2K, not only 120 Hz, not only 0.2 milliseconds, but also 500 nits at SDR. Or if you push it to HDR, Asus claims 550 nits for HDR brightness. You can kind of start to get some HDR level effects and start to see better contrast and visuals, but really you're going to need that next step up to at least HDR 600, for which this laptop is not rated. Now, if we look at the IPS display by comparison here, we've got a standard color gamut. Over here, we've got 100% DCI-P3, and that takes us to point number 5. The color gamuts also make a huge difference in your overall visual experience. A display combined with all of the other stuff that we talked about, resolution, refresh rate, response time, brightness, also needs to have a color gamut coverage. And those are measured usually in 100% of sRGB. We have sRGB, we have DCI-P3, we have Adobe RGB, and then finally we have Rec 2020, which is also sometimes known as BT 2020, which is what Hollywood and films use for rendering their content and mastering their content. That said, the IPS here is a very poor showing. We've only got a 45% NTSC coverage, which if you translate, it comes to somewhere around 70% roughly, I believe, on sRGB scale. So we're not even talking about DCI-P3 here or Adobe RGB, never mind BT 2020. On the OLED display here, we fare much, much better. We've got not only 100% sRGB coverage, we've also got 100% of DCI-P3 coverage. And DCI-P3 is a standard that's for photographers, so doing content editing, color correction work. You can certainly get all that done on the ProArt StudioBook. It has that capability. It would have been nice to see if it had Adobe RGB as well, because then you have a lot more variety to do print content, print work, Pantone color matching as well. However, that's a different story. So as you can see here, the visuals are quite stunning. There's a huge difference in the overall clarity, the contrast, this fuzzy haze that you see from the IPS display due to the uneven backlight and backlight being shot in from different angles rather than each individually knit phosphorus-based pixel on the OLED. So that said, overall, this is what I would sum up my experience as for 2023. And if you should consider an OLED gaming display for 2023, Absolutely. As long as it fits in your budget, you've got high resolution display, high refresh rate, low response times, and you've got a brighter display. I would say avoid the older generation OLED displays that are 400 nits or maybe 350 nits. I don't think they're going to give you a good OLED experience. It'll be simply too dark. And that takes me to 3 bonus issues or concerns that you should be considering when purchasing an OLED. Number 1 is that brightness. Now, because of the organic nature of the OLED display technology, over time it's going to start to fade. How much, how often, how soon, how long, nobody really can predict. There's so many factors at play here. You know, how often you use the display, how long you use it, what brightness levels do you use it at, do you shut it down, do you leave static content on the display, and so on. So that's one certain factor to consider. Number 2, because it is a OLED display, it needs to have a glass substrate layer on top. That means you're going to get a lot more glare, and you're going to have if you have any kind of light in the room, you'll get these reflections. So I'll tilt it down here to show if I can on the camera. Not quite. My desk is a little too busy here. But yeah, if you have any kind of ambient light in the room that's brighter than the display itself, you will see reflections. And if that's something that bothers you, particularly when you're trying to get work done or working on a white screen with spreadsheets open all day or typing a document, it may be an issue that you need to consider. You know, in contrast, we've got a traditional matte IPS display here. You won't have any issues with glare, or much less than you would have with the OLED display. And number 4, you have to consider, of course, or excuse me, number 3, you have to consider, of course, the price. We're talking here the Lenovo Lock 15 at about $1,200 Canadian, versus we're looking at the ProArt StudioBook, which sits at nearly 3 times the price at $3,500. So, of course, there's other differentiating factors as well. We've got a 4050 here versus a 4070 on this ProArt StudioBook display. But if we look at just display for display, you have to look ultimately and decide what is the most critical component of a laptop for you. And in my personal opinion, it's the display. You look at the display all day long. And if you don't have a good display, which has also all other kinds of good tech baked in, such as low blue light issues, you don't have the pulse width modulation issues that sometimes the IPS panel can experience at lower refresh rates or lower brightness. And also, if you'll have much more variability in terms of the brightness range on an IPS display than you will with, oops, if I do function lock here. All right, there we go. Yeah, and you'll have also much more brightness range on the IPS, and you still have visibility at the lowest brightness range as opposed to the OLED. The OLED will get nearly black. It will be very hard display to see. So that said, it does get very bright. Would I recommend an OLED display in 2023? Absolutely. But make sure you understand some of the caveats that we've just mentioned, looked at what your use cases are. If you're gaming primarily, you'll need to do some extra care in order to make sure that your gaming OLED display lasts as long as it possibly can. If you're using it for content creation, I think this is absolutely essential because you need to be able to do color corrective work and to be color accurate. In that case, this display is also Pantone certified and calibrated from the factory from ASUS. And we've got a delta here of less than 0.7. So, or around 0.7, which means it's very, very color accurate, and you can definitely get all your creative work done. And it would be amiss if, being a creator laptop, you could not do so. So that's all I wanted to sum up here in this video. Hopefully you enjoyed that. You know, if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. In the future, I'll be trying to do more varied content, but alas, for the time being, I'm limited in the way I could show this off. Hope you found this video helpful. Also, get subscribed to my channel, and please share my content across your social media to help grow this channel. And number 3, I'm now also doing game streaming on my channel almost on a daily basis, and those games are streamed on the actual laptops that I'm reviewing. So I'd love for you to come and watch. You can ask me, questions about the laptops. As I go through the review process, I'll be using the particular device I'm working on as my gaming and my streaming device too, so you can see how we fare on a Lock 15, for example, with a 4050 streaming at 1080p versus the ProArt StudioBook 16, which can stream at 3.2K by 2K, or more likely a lower resolution so that YouTube does not freak out. Anyway, thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.